Thank you for listening to the BJJBrick Podcast. We'll be bringing you Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and good times. We hope to flatten your Jiu-Jitsu learning curve, help you get the most out of your grappling ability, and meet your goals both on and off the mat.
Welcome back to the BJJBrick Podcast. Today we have episode 256, Lessons Learned and Mistakes We Have Made. We definitely have made mistakes, and I know my two partners in crime, Joe Thomas and Byron Jabara, have made a couple mistakes.
Yes, we've all made mistakes, and excited to share those. And there's two ways you can learn. You can learn by doing, and so you got to make all your own mistakes, or you can learn from learning from others. And that's like reading, or learning from wisdom from your instructor. And so hopefully today you'll be able to learn a little bit from us and not make some of the same mistakes we have.
Yeah, because what Byron
from our mistakes.
Yeah, definitely learn from our mistakes, because what Byron was trying to say, tuning into this podcast was not a mistake. So we just wanted to make sure you get that right.
Yep, and we got Joe over here, who is known for wearing out an eraser on a pencil. So he's definitely made a few mistakes. Joe, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Speaking of mistakes, I thought I was wrong once, but I was mistaken. So yeah. I can relate.
How embarrassing!
I like that one, Joe.
That was the most embarrassing I've ever seen you, Joe.
Yeah.
Yep. This to kind of get everyone on the same page. This is the last episode of the month. We like to do a topic, and the topic we're covering is lessons learned and mistakes we've made. We're going to stick to most of the jiu-jitsu topic.
Joe was telling me about a mistake he made, not the one that he was mistaken on, but he was telling me when he first started, he could have done a lot better and really flattened out his learning curve if he would have checked out Byron's audiobook, 6 games, let's start this over again.
You're going to nail it, Kerry, I can tell.
Speaking of mistakes.
Speaking of mistakes, there was one right there. But no, hey, Joe and I were talking beforehand about a mistake he had made previously, and it was in his first year of jiu-jitsu, and if he would have picked up a copy of Byron's audiobook, your first year in BJJ, he would have basically navigated through the rough waters. Joe, how'd you like the maritime pun right there?
Navigating rough waters. Good one,
yep.
Gary.
Yeah, no, but definitely check out Byron's audiobook, your first year of BJJ. We have a link to it on your show notes. It's 2.5 hours of content, only $11.99, and it'll really definitely help you out during your first year of jiu-jitsu, from everything from the benefits of jiu-jitsu, like losing weight, basically getting stronger, more flexible, to what moves to work on, to picking the right school, everything you're going to need to keep going through that first year and basically be on the way to becoming a blue belt.
There you go. And there'll be a link in the show notes. And I don't think the book was around when Joe started, so that was my mistake. I didn't make the book early enough for you, Joe.
Or Joe could have started earlier.
Later.
Well, you can make the mistake, though, of not availing yourself to all the resources out there. And so this is definitely a good resource. And if you're new to jiu-jitsu, don't let a year go by without taking advantage of this.
Yep, that's really what it's designed to help you not make as many mistakes and make that first year a little easier. Guys, we have a off-the-mat lesson that we drag back to the mat and discuss. And I've got it this week, guys. It was last weekend, which would actually be 2 weekends ago. We're recording this a week in advance. But last weekend, my wife and I did a relay of a triathlon because we do several 5Ks a year. Maybe, I don't know, 3 or 4, maybe 5 even some years. And they're fun. But my brother has gotten into doing triathlons. He's like, do a triathlon. I said, I don't really have that desire. He goes, just do it, and you could even do it as a relay. So that made it a little easier because I've never swam a long distance like that, and I've never biked like that either. So I didn't want to do too much new things in one, too much suffering or too much trying to figure out what's going on in one event. And so my wife said she would do the bike, and I'll do the swim, and then we both ran it. So we get there, race day, we're talking, and you get this little microchip that goes around your ankle, kind of like Gary's house arrest chip. And for the relay, you go into what's called the transition area, where you keep the bikes, you keep your change of clothes, you keep all your kind of stuff organized, and you go from swimming. You change out of that, and you put your bike stuff on. Like your helmet, you get your bike off the rack, and some people change shorts, some people put a shirt on or whatever, and then you take off and you bike, and they time you. So as you enter in the transition area, the timer says click, and then you're in there for like 20 seconds or 5 minutes or whatever happens, and then it tells you when you leave the transition area. And I thought, oh, that's weird. I told my brother, oh, do they not count the time that you're changing? He says, oh yeah, they count that. That's absolutely a big part of it. But this is your race, and you're racing against yourself. And I'm like, man, okay, that makes sense. But as I thought about that, it kind of settled with me more and more that it's like there was barely over 100 competitors in this thing, but only a few of them were actually trying to win it. Most of them were trying to beat a time that they had gotten before or to do well. Very few of them were actually racing against the group. And those guys were light years ahead of what we were doing. But it's really a race against yourself. So like he looks at that time when he does it, and he sees, he was in there for a minute transition. And he looked at the guys who are actually doing well. Theirs is under 30 seconds. They're changing really fast, or they're not changing. They're just going. And like that would be a way that he could pick up his time just to evaluate it. So just his advice that day, the morning of the triathlon, was you're racing against yourself. You're not racing against anybody here. And I thought that was good advice. And taking it on the mat, like, why are you here? Are you constantly comparing yourself to everybody that you're in the room with, or are you constantly comparing yourself to your actual competition? You're having, getting better at jiu-jitsu is also a big part of that. It's a personal journey, and you're trying to improve. And that's why I think that a lot of us feel that it's very rewarding, because we do improve as time goes. And getting that sense of accomplishment, even if it's just incremental, is very rewarding. So I thought that was good advice as far as how to gauge the event. And, if I do another one, I'll be able to compare the swim time with my other time. And if my wife does one, she'll be able to compare the bike time with her bike time and try to improve and do a little bit better next time.
So not to derail this from the life lesson, but personally, how did you feel about the experience, Byron? Was it good? Did you enjoy it?
So that's an interesting question in itself. This was 100%, other than the run part, it was new. I'd never done a triathlon. And a triathlon's a lot more involved than a 5K. A 5K, you show up 10 minutes before the race. Most people are already there before that. Get in your car, find the starting line, and you go. And there's people that are, dressed in a costume, or a lot of times we'll take our dog with us. It's just an event, usually there for charity. And sure, you could run them hard, but again, you're racing for yourself. You want to beat your own PR. I've never been in a 5K where I thought that I might win it or place. So this thing, you got to show up more than an hour early. They write your number on your legs and your arms, and they tell you all these rules, and it's a real big deal. And like, you have equipment there, you have your bike, you have changes of clothes, you have to get everything organized. So showing up way earlier is more involved. And the athletes that were doing this are a little more intense of a breed. There weren't a whole lot of recreational competitors like I would say there are in a 5K. People that, a lot of people had bikes that were several thousands of dollars. And that wasn't an oddity to see that. And it's just, people were more serious, I think, than I anticipated. And like another thing, I got an email like 3 days before the race with this. It was kind of like a nasty toned email about all the different ways I can get disqualified and get in trouble at the race. And, you must bring your ID, you must bring your triathlon license that you have, you must do all these things. I'm like, man, this is just such a negative email. It was kind of a turnoff. When I got there, everybody's super nice. But it was just, it wasn't real welcoming to get that a couple days beforehand. I'm like, man, these guys are really uptight. I'm not actually going to win this thing. Like, although I could mess up and that shouldn't matter to anybody but myself. But the email was real nasty, but the actual people were all friendly. So,
they Yeah, they needed you to show up early. Like you said, you had all this stuff to do, and you said they had to put the number on your arm, and because your arms are so skinny, they needed some more time because they had to find a place where they could fit the number 1.
They just used like a little postage stamp with your name and address on there, just because it's super small writing. No, they just take a Sharpie and they wrote it on there, but they give me somebody with this real small handwriting, Gary.
Well, yeah, that's definitely good.
Speaking of lessons you can learn, it sounds like there's some correlations there. Maybe the difference between competing in a real small, casual, local jiu-jitsu tournament and going to a big event in California or Las Vegas or something where some events you show up with the gi and they could care less what your gi looks like or how it fits. And other events you show up and, man, it's got to measure just to a certain length on your wrist and your ankles, and you can't have patches in certain places. And yeah, it's important to be prepared for more than just the physical aspects of the event, but what else is involved in it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because it would never be fun, like Joe said, to show up to a tournament here and your gi's not right, your patches aren't right, and you have to go home. You're kicked out.
Gary has moved to a witness protection program, and his voice is down 2 octaves.
What happened?
Your voice dropped about a half an octave, Gary.
He's now a tough guy, Gary.
What happened?
Oh, tough guy, Gary. So right now, Gary has ripped off the sleeves of his arms of his shirt, and you're not playing with us, Gary.
No, I'm not.
No, I'm not. No. Anyway, Gary, I like tough guy Gary. He's lots of fun.
It's New Jersey, Gary.
I have no freaking clue what you guys are talking about.
Sure. I don't even know if this is Gary over there anymore. And I'm going to drop it too, Gary. Usually I'm kind of nasally, but I'll just work at it a little bit differently to fit in. But yeah, the comparison, I can't do that voice very long, Gary. I admire you for doing that. The comparison, I would say almost is more like jiu-jitsu would be to MMA. I mean, you have to learn a whole new set of skills. And I talked about this on previous episodes. Swimming 50 meters, to me, was exhausting. Not that I didn't have the cardiovascular system to do it. I just didn't know how to do it without making myself exhausted. And I quickly learned, some better swimming technique. And the 400 meters was no problem. And actually, a week after the race, I swam a mile. And it took me about 50 minutes, and I felt fine. And literally, it would have been impossible for me to swim a mile before I started a month and a half ago training for this race. And so, the improvement was drastic, but it was all technique. I'm working with my cardio system that I've built from jiu-jitsu, and it's there, but my swimming technique had a lot to be desired. And so I really had to focus on, getting better at my technique and my form. And I went from not being able to really swim more than 50 meters without being exhausted to swimming a mile in a relatively short amount of time. And I'd encourage anybody to learn how to swim a little bit of a long distance. It's not a hard skill to pick up, and it could make the difference someday if you ever have to swim like that.
Did you do the crawl stroke the whole way?
So I did. When I swam the mile, I did. When I swam in the muddy lake waters of Kansas, that is actually a hard thing to do because you can't see anything. So you have to constantly kind of take a peek and look up and look to the horizon. And my brother, that's one of his weaknesses, is he doesn't swim in a straight line. Nobody does, but he has a hard time of remembering to look up. So he'll swim kind of diagonal and make a zigzag pattern a little bit more than I did. But I peaked more. He had his head down and was swimming harder. But he finished a little bit ahead of me, but not by much because he swam further than me. But,
open water swimming and swimming pool swimming is completely different. You get a little bit of chop, and it's two completely different activities.
And you have that blue line at the bottom of the pool that keeps you going in a straight line, and
right,
and the chlorine,
and the chlorine is
no
nice.
No fish, no sharks.
The sharks are a motivator.
No water moccasins, so it does make it a lot easier.
Yep.
But Byron, the question I want to know is, I know when you ran your first marathon.
You sound different, but it sounds like a little echoey, maybe.
I don't know what it is.
Okay, you keep going then.
Seriously?
Yeah,
it must just be cell reception or something.
Okay.
I don't know. You're doing all right. I didn't know if you changed the way you were doing something then for 5 minutes ago or not.
No, seriously.
Okay.
Whatever you guys were talking about.
Your voice
earlier.
was low, and I thought you were messing with us, but that's funny.
Oh.
Carry on.
Okay. It's probably just the internet here at the hotel.
Could be. It's good enough. That's for sure.
Okay. Now, Byron, what I wanted to know is, I know when you ran your marathon, you ran it in grappling shorts. You were probably the only person who was wearing grappling shorts. Did you have some no-gi attire for either the running portion, the swimming portion, or the swimming portion? Or the running, swimming, or biking portion there, Byron?
Well, I didn't do the biking portion because my wife did that. We did it as a relay.
Oh, okay.
I just swam in. Literally, I was the most, like, all these guys were in Speedos and all this. A lot of them had like one piece. There was a top and pants together to swim in, and they'd bike in the same thing. I swim in board shorts and didn't wear a shirt. Like, you could tell by looking at me, I'm not a very serious athlete. And then I had as much time as I needed to change for the run because my wife was biking for 12 miles, so I wasn't in a hurry. So our transition time was pretty elite because it was just show up and then pass off the little ankle bracelet thing and then go. But yeah, I did run, and that's funny. I did run my marathon in some no-gi shorts, but not this time. I thought
that was awesome. Yeah.
I don't have a lot of shorts. But Joe found us a quote this week, and I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, I actually heard this one on another podcast I was listening to, and I didn't realize it was attributed to John Wooden. Byron did the research and found that out, and I'm pretty sure everybody's familiar with John Wooden, but if you're not, he was the head coach at UCLA for years, had a very successful career. In the early 60s to mid 70s, he won like a dozen out of 14 or 15 years. They were the NCAA champions. It helps that he had Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for part of that time, and he had Bill Walton for part of that time, and that certainly helps. But he knows a thing or two about accomplishments. And the quote that is attributed to him is, "Do not mistake activity as accomplishment." And I think you could probably make a lot of correlations to that quote and jiu-jitsu, but I kind of look at what you do throughout the course of a class. When you go to class and you go training. And another thing that helps explain this from my perspective is that all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. A square is a specific type of rectangle. And I would say that all accomplishments are a result of activity, but not all activity results in accomplishments. And if you come visit my home gym, there'll be a portion of instruction, and our coach will show some technique. And if it's from half guard, then the next portion of the class will be specific training, starting from half guard. And then after that, there'll be full training starting on our feet. And you can come and you can do the half guard technique that the coach is teaching. And then when he says, okay, now specific training, you start in half guard, you can do whatever you want. You don't have to do the technique that the coach was showing you. And when it comes to full training, you don't have to try to get to half guard at all. You can just go for a takedown and knee on belly or mount or whatever your favorite top position is. And that's a lot of activity, but I'm not sure it results in the same accomplishment as if you take the class, you do the technique that the coach is showing, and then when you do your specific training, you seek out the techniques that he was showing you. And then when you do your full training, you seek out that position. I'm not saying everybody has to train this way, but I think training smart like that, you're doing the same amount of work as somebody who's not doing that. But at the end of the day, I think you're going to see better results. So that's my take on it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, Joe, I see where you're coming from, but I kind of looked at it from a different way. I like what you're saying, that you are going to, have a better accomplishment if you go through those steps. But I kind of looked at it, maybe disagreed with this a little bit. And, I didn't really look at it in depth the kind of way you were seeing it when I first saw this activity or first saw this quote. I was thinking, the activity of, I thought about when I first started jiu-jitsu. You know, the very first time I wanted to go to a jiu-jitsu class, I chickened out. I drove by the place and I didn't show up. You know, I went home, you know, defeated, you know, my head was down, felt like I lost confidence. And the second time I did show up, I did the activity, which is the class. I actually showed up for practice one day. I was absolutely atrocious. I didn't know what I was doing, but I did consider the activity, showing up, as an accomplishment. So I think, you know, just doing it the other way, I do think just by me showing up that first day, knowing absolutely nothing, probably doing everything wrong, but I do look at it that it's a huge step. The accomplishment was I did it. I didn't chicken out. I had the guts to do it. And, you know, here I am 15 years later, the rest is history. And it was all just because of that very first time that I finally got the guts to try it.
Gary, you see it that way. Look at this quote, and I think, don't mistake activity as accomplishment. And what are you trying to accomplish? Good training. And I see that as a mistake as a coach. Yeah, we're working hard. Yeah, we're doing something. But are we getting better at jiu-jitsu? And that's really the coach's category as far as what they're training, what drills they're doing. Are they doing like drills that are kind of useless? Are they doing drills that are adding to their game? Are they doing drills that, you know, are they just working hard? And if you're going to be working hard, you might as well be doing something that'll actually help you with your jiu-jitsu. And that's what I think of that as is do something. Yeah, it's good. Get out there, work hard. You work on that conditioning and your strength training on the mats with your training partners. But you need to be also finding ways to make your jiu-jitsu better at the same time. And that's like super training. Possibly super duper. I don't know for sure the level of it.
Super duper duper training, definitely.
So that's what the quote says to me is your training being effective. Don't mistake just being active or being busy as being quality training. And quality training gets you to this sense of accomplishment.
Yep, I would agree. I think you could take that same train of thought and put it to an in the match context as well. You've seen guys who get in bottom position and they're squeezing their opponent and they're pushing and pulling and doing things that as maybe an experienced grappler, they're watching them and you can see that they're just wasting energy and burning themselves out. There's lots of activity, but they're not really improving their situation at all.
Yeah, and that's a good example as far as attempting a lot of things, but not actually accomplishing anything. But you need to look at that as like, what did you actually accomplish? Were you able to confuse somebody? Were you able to misdirect them? And maybe the activity had a point. Maybe it didn't have any point at all. And it was just you working desperately to find something that would work. And so just to have that real evaluation of what your activity was accomplishing. And if it was, you know, a busy guard's hard to pass because it's hard to start passing. So maybe you're just accomplishing that. But if you're just piddling around in different attacks and not committing to anything, that's just a lot of activity that may not actually be doing you anything that's helping you.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of the article we did, I think it was last week, the Luther Lever stuff, where they were talking about repetition, you know, kind of a, you know, useless movement. We just keep doing it over and over and over again. And it's going to get past. Your guard's going to get past if you keep doing the same thing. You have a lot of activity, but it's really not getting you anywhere, and it's actually being a detriment to you.
Yeah, Gary, I will say that I like that you had the courage to stand up and disagree with John Wooden.
You know, it was funny when I did see that article or the quote when you sent it to me. I was like, you know, I kind of disagree with this, and you know, I was like, man, it's John Wooden, and I'm like, man, should I actually say this? You know, you feel kind of terrible. John Wooden's a legend.
Yeah, you're a basketball guy. You're pretty familiar with him, huh?
Yeah. But you know, it's, you know, everybody can take stuff a different way, and to me, just that activity of showing up was a huge accomplishment. You know, I really didn't learn much that day, but it was a start of my journey. If I didn't have the guts to finally take that step, I wouldn't be here today. I'd probably be on a cooking podcast or something else.
Yeah, if your options are to do something that's less than perfect or do nothing at all, certainly doing something that's less than perfect is better.
Yeah, and I mean, just look at Joe and I. We hang out with Byron.
It's better than nothing at all.
Every day.
Yep.
Yeah, if you wait to do the perfect anything, you're never going to even start, because you have to have failures to start. I mean, Gary talks about cooking. The guy can't boil water correctly, but what he has been able to do is fill the pot up with water first, and then getting it to heat up is one thing he's struggling with now. But if he just wants to start boiling water, he has to first struggle and figure things out for a little while in the kitchen. And he's tried microwaving it, didn't work out. He's tried putting it in the oven, didn't have a lot of success, and now he's thinking about the stovetop as the way to go.
And I will get it working. It's just I'll keep trying. I've got a lot of determination, and I'll get there.
And then he'll be able to sanitize his cup.
We don't know where you're going with that meaning there, Byron.
Well, you got to drink out of a clean cup.
Got to have clean drinking utensils. That's right.
Yeah, because I mean that's a mistake some people make.
Yep.
And I think it's about time to get on to the topic of today's episodes: lessons learned and mistakes we have made.
So we've had a full week to prepare for this, and I think I wrote down several to get the ball rolling here, and hoping you guys have some stuff to throw in as well. I talked with my wife about this topic, and she said, "Oh, that'll be interesting." And then she asked me two questions, pretty much right off the bat, that made me think a little differently about this podcast. She said, "What mistake do most people make?" And my gut instinct answer was, it depends why they're training. Because you could be training for any number of reasons, and that is going to change what mistake you could be making. And then the answer immediately after that was, oftentimes the reason why they're training is a mistake, and they should be training for some other reason. Which may not seem like much. Explain which one?
That, Byron. So explain the reason why their training may be a mistake. Because I kind of just think if you're training, that's good.
Yeah.
I don't see the mistake part of it.
Well, if you're training to win a tournament, that's your big goal. If you're training to impress your friends, or get a girlfriend or boyfriend or whatever, I think that most people should be training for basic fitness reasons and overall enjoyment of the process. And if you're not doing those, and you overlook that as even a possibility of jiu-jitsu, is that it's fun and I'm getting in good shape. And so if it's all on how good you compete, sure, you could have a great competition career, but when you're done with that, it's hard to transition to doing jiu-jitsu for fun and doing something for another 40 years until you get near Gary's age, and something that could keep you fit and healthy for a long time. And so I think that's a common mistake, that people don't train for their own personal enjoyment and for the benefits of social interactions with buddies and friends and that sort of thing. And they overlook that for getting better at fighting or any number of reasons. That I think that the physical fitness aspect and enjoying the process should be almost top of the list on most people. Sure, some people, you have that lofty goal and you have to push it aside for a while, because if you want to be a world champion, it's not going to be super fun training. But you could accomplish that if you push the funness aside a little bit, most likely, and you do some things that aren't real enjoyable in the process of getting better at jiu-jitsu. But I think that your goal could push you away from jiu-jitsu long-term if it's not the right reason to be training.
Definitely, Byron. That does make sense. I like that explanation.
Now, if we back up a minute, though, and press Byron to be honest, when he first told his wife about the topic, she said, "Oh, well, that'll be an easy one for you."
Well, then her other question was, "What mistake are you making any mistakes now?" And I said, "Most definitely, I'm making mistakes. The easiest one I can think of it's on my list. Is lacking a focus. Like Mr. Miyagi said, focus, Danielson. And right now, if I hit the mats and I'm training, I'm working on guillotines. I'm working on leg locks. I'm working on a couple different sweeps. Working a little bit of deep half guard. I'm kind of all over the place. But I get the most gains technique-wise when I come in and I'm going to leg lock everybody I could roll with. That I want to, like, I don't really, play those people who don't know how to escape them properly. But, like, I have a goal and I show up with an intention. That is real high-quality training. And I think, generally speaking, I don't have that sort of dead set focus. Really easy to do with escapes. I'm going to escape mount a bunch today. And then everyone's happy to get mount for a little while and see if I can weasel out of it. I don't really have that focus right now. And I think that most of us go and train and try to get better and have fun. And like I was saying, those other things. But technique-wise, you should have some sort of a focus on your training, whether it be for the week or the month or even go on for years. Like as I mentioned, guillotine. I've been working on my guillotine for a couple of years now. I think maybe it's been more than a year, but it's something that I had like a fire, like a high level of focus for a while, and now it's always in my mind, but I'm not actively trying to get more research done on the topic. I'm not trying to ask everybody who gets out of it what happened and how could all those sort of things, but I should be. So my lack of focus. Are you guys super focused, or are you kind of a little bit loose with your training and what you're working on?
Well, Byron, I will tell you one thing you taught me very early in my path here is to focus on a move. I remember you were telling me, geez, within the first year that take something and spend a month working on it. And I'm the kind of guy who goes a little bit crazy where I would spend 6 months working on it. So, that's one thing that you have passed off to me really early in my career, and I have spent a lot of time focusing on one thing. And when we had Rolly and Tim for the BJJBrick event, and we did the live broadcast with them, I just remember Rolly talking about, I was telling him that this is the third seminar I've been basically with Rolly, two of them the exact same, and one was a little bit different. But, I loved how he went out and he talked about, there's nothing wrong with doing the same seminar over and over again because you're really going to drill down into it. Like he was saying, his stuff comes off the single leg X. And he's like, if you really want to get good at my ankle lock, doing the double outside ashi is not really going to help you. Everything he does is off the single leg X. And he's talking about really, really just drilling down into it, really getting so good at that one move, as you call it, getting a brick. Just having, getting like you're hit with a brick when that move comes. And so that's one thing I think I've always been good at. And thanks to you early in my career is the focus part. So,
Gary, you hit the mat training today. What are you focused on?
What am I focused on right now? Is that what you're saying? Right now it's Kimuras. I kind of go back and forth between Kimuras and leg locks. And it's funny, each time I go back, I learn a little bit more, something I missed. But right now I'm really, focusing down on Kimuras and finding new ways and little tweaks and just stuff to make it a little bit better.
How about you, Joe? Have you found yourself lacking focus while you're on the mats?
Did you guys say something?
Oh, look, squirrel. Like everything else in jiu-jitsu, this comes and goes. There's been times I've been really focused and other times largely for me, it's just other things in life. I get busy and I find myself in class and I haven't thought about it all day. But since Rolly's seminar, I've had a goal and I've been pretty successful at it. I'm not doing a lot of study off the mat, but I'm intending to get somebody in a single leg X every class and attack the ankle. So it's not something I'm really studying, but I'm committed to keeping it on the back burner and trying to hit it at least once every class.
Joe, I like what you said there. You're committed to getting a single leg X at least once every practice. I think that's awesome, and that's a great goal to have right there. That is neat.
Yeah, and he's found that showing up for the kids class has really made that dream come true. Getting that single leg X at least once. That's a good way to view that. You're not so much stressing finishing the leg lock. You're trying to get the position, and then it'll be hold the position and keep it tight, and then you can start working your finishes a little bit more successfully.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think a lot of times, especially on leg locks, I mean, you're trying to tap somebody out with their strongest, muscle, and if you don't have control of it, you're not going to finish it. You have to have control, and I think a lot of times people put the cart before the horse and just start squeezing that foot and trying to choke the foot, and versus having control first. And I definitely think you need to have that control going before you can choke it.
Yeah, I think it was last week you said the same thing about putting the cart before the horse, and something about wanting to get the submission before it was available, and just going for stuff kind of wild. So,
yeah, I guess I do say what I meant though is I will let somebody pass to hook up a submission,
to hook up the horse to the cart.
Yeah, to hook up the horse. Yeah, but I can see how you could take that. You're always looking for ways to keep your buddy down. So
the horse cannot push the cart, Gary.
The horse can push the cart.
Oh, really?
You guys just got to learn how to think outside the box, guys.
All right.
The cart, hey, Joe, you're thinking wrong. The cart is very small. It's just...
Gary's cart is anyway.
Yeah.
I told you guys numerous times, it's not the size of your sword. It's the amount of magic that you have with it.
And some reason you put your sword in a cart and the horse pushes it around. And that's all good.
That is all good.
But I would think that the lack of focus is one that we've had. I know I only speak for myself, that I've had, and that when I find myself like laser pointed on something and really focused in, man, my jiu-jitsu takes a big jump. And then I get away from that, and you just get in the grind of just training and working. And, it goes back to the quote about, don't mistake activity for, and accomplishment. You switch out for results. And, I do the same amount of activity when I'm focused as when I'm not focused, but the accomplishment, the results I get are drastically different. And I think Joe's doing a smart job of making his goal both measurable and obtainable. I'm sure he can get the position about every time he shows up to jiu-jitsu, and he has here's a number. I want to do it at least once, and maybe that number should be 2 or 3 as time goes on. Based on different opponents or training partners he's working with, and eventually he'll have, I want to finish 1 or 2 of those, or I want to finish. Really said, if you're not finishing most of them, I think he had a percent like 70% of your time you get single leg X with ankle lock, you've got problems, and that's like it's not perfect. You should be getting that high percentage of finish from that position, and so eventually, if you keep pushing that, 70% of the time you're in that position, you should get that submission. And, that's a goal to work towards. It's always going to be kind of running from you. And maybe someday, if you train just right, you could get it even higher than that. But I think that incremental goal setting is a smart thing to do, Joe.
Yeah, and doing something like this on the heels of having attended the seminar, it really has helped reinforce a lot of the things that he taught, because there's times I'll go to class and I'll get the single leg X, I'll attack the leg, and at some point in the process it falls apart. And then as much as 2 or 3 days later, I'll be thinking about it and be like, dang it, that's what Rolly said, And so, on the heels of the seminar, if you go to a seminar and then you don't work on it for 3 months, I don't know if the seminar is going to benefit you all that much.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not going to benefit you. And Byron can tell you that the next week after that seminar, Byron and I were rolling on Saturday after, so 1 week later. And I was really trying to work on, I don't know what he called it, but not a straight ankle lock, but the one you kind of push it across your body and get a rear naked choke grip. Yep. And I just call it the rolly. But I was so happy because I did a back step out of a half guard, and it landed right into place, and I had to stop rolling, and Byron was next to me, and I had to show him. I was like, hey, look at, I call it the rollie. I was like, hey, look at the new setup I found for the rollie. And so, yeah, it's, just drilling down into everything we learned and trying to, like Joe said, do it at every single practice and just get better with it. If I don't do it, and it's a waste of a seminar, I have to remember this stuff and try it. And I really like Joe's idea of trying to do it every single class to at least one person.
Yep, and if that makes you roll one more time at the end of class to really find that position, that's also good for you. Looking at another thing that I've had, and this is similar, let's look at through the lens of the focus thing, is back when I was a purple belt, I did a lot of rubber guard. That was, I'd pull guard, play rubber guard. And I really enjoyed it. And I was tapping out a lot of people with that and having, success. And after literally a year and a half, maybe 2 years of doing this at purple belt, I came to the realization is every day I tap out is a white belt or a blue belt in my rubber guard. And I'm not trying to disrespect the rubber guard. If you're a rubber guard player and you like it and it's going good, great. But any part of your game that you're dedicating that much time for and you're not tapping out your equals on the mat, you got a problem. And I thought about that. I'm like, this isn't helping me get better at jiu-jitsu at all. It's really stalling me out. I'm working hard. I'm focused, but for me, I'm focused on the wrong thing completely. And so that time, it probably was almost 2 years of rubber guard focus that I had. It was wrong. It didn't help me. Sure, I enjoyed rolling and stuff like that and had a good time and feeling like I was getting better, but my evaluation was a bit slow to how good I was at that position. And it didn't take me long after I figured out to just stop doing that altogether and start doing other things. And if I could have made that evaluation 6 months in instead of almost 2 years in, I would have been smarter with changing my focus. So really, my history with the rubber guard wasn't real great, and I wish I realized that sooner. And so maybe you could look at your game. What part of your game is not up to speed that you're spending a lot of focus and energy on, and it's optional. Like your mounting escapes have to be up to speed. You have to be good at those. But I have the choice to play rubber guard or not. And I'm choosing to do that, and it's not really working out for me. Do you remember that at all, Gary?
You were saying that. I don't even remember you ever playing rubber guard. I really don't. So when you were saying that, I was kind of stunned. But, I think that is a good point. I had a long time where I didn't really work my stand-up at all. I always just had the notion that I want to be on the ground anyhow. I don't, I like to play from the bottom, and I want to be on the ground. And after getting put on the ground by some guys who got such good pressure that I can't move, and it made me realize I really do need to start working my stand-up game. That was a big hole. And so, I spent some time doing that and still do. But, I really think you have to work on stuff that is going to help your game. Very important.
Yep, I would agree. And for me, Gary neglected the stand-up for a long time. And to agree, I'm guilty of that as well. But for me, it's been attacking the feet. And so I'm really happy I got up there and attended that seminar with Rolly. And, everybody I know plays the footlock game, at least to some extent. And I've just sort of, I don't know, I've avoided it for a long time. And I've come to the realization that I need to add some more tools to my tool bag.
It's always good to have, more than one tool in your tool bag.
Yeah. And they say attacking the feet is adding another 50% of techniques. I think that math is wrong, but it does add a lot of techniques. I mean, clearly you have a neck to attack, you have 2 arms, 2 legs, and, if you count sweeps and other, reversals as things, they're not attacking the feet. But you do add a lot of submissions, and you do change the way your opponent responds to you when you're able to attack their feet. So, 2 knees, 2 feet. Some people, like Gary, even have a little bit extra body parts that are available to attack.
And don't be afraid don't be afraid to throw a wrist lock in every now and then as well.
Yeah, a wrist lock is the same thing as like an ankle lock. Boom. It's the equivalent. Mind-blowing stuff coming out at you out of the BjjBrick podcast today.
Yeah, definitely the mind-blowing stuff. But, going back to lessons learned and mistakes we've made, my biggest mistake I've made, numerous times through my career, and I think I just did the best job of it, not the mistake of trying to correct a mistake here recently, but being injured. I love jiu-jitsu so much that every time I'm injured, I come back way too soon. I will train when I probably shouldn't be training. It'll make my injury last that much longer because I'll keep tweaking it, and pretty soon it turns into a 6-month injury before it heals. And over the BJJ event weekend, I pulled a muscle in my quad, and normally
extreme upper quad, inner.
Inner upper quad. Normally I would have been back, the next day. That's kind of how I am. But this time I kept myself out. I still showed up and watched. I still showed up to different practices and watched. And I didn't even drill. I didn't, for at least a week. I think it was a week when I finally got back, and I rolled slow. And I'm still rolling slow right now. And it's been 3 to 4 weeks. And, but my quad feels great. I still haven't got back in the gym and hit weights, on it yet, which I normally would have already done, kind of stupidity. And, that has been my biggest thing. That has hurt my gains, where Byron's talking about being laser focused to get better. When I'm not healthy and I can't give it all I can on the mat, I'm not going to be laser focused. I'm not going to be able to do everything. And, it's definitely shortchanged my game, and that's one thing I do have to get better at. And hopefully, after this last one, which I think I did a better job, hopefully it carries over for any injuries I have down the road.
Yeah, this whole thing, a phrase has been coined. It's going to be coined right now, called geriatric jiu-jitsu. You're getting older, Gary, and it takes more time to heal. And you're starting to get wiser about letting your body actually heal. And countless times, I don't know how, literally, I don't know, more times than I can imagine, I've seen Gary limp off the mat and get a drink of water, and then limp right back on the mat and go train some more. It's like, Gary, are you hurt or are you not hurt? Well, take some time. You don't. So hopefully you're treating yourself a little bit wiser. And you just, like I said, you love jiu-jitsu. You don't want to not do it just because your leg is going numb or you're leaking more than you normally leak. Geriatric jiu-jitsu is the phase you're entering into, my friend.
That we're going to have to get that on Wikipedia. Geriatric jiu-jitsu.
Somebody please send me the link to that after they make it, and we'll definitely have that on as an article of the week or something. Man, that would be fun. I don't know how to hook up Wikipedia, but somebody could do that. That'd be cool. Looking at more, so kind of on the injury page, I could look at some of my more serious injuries. So I've never had surgery from jiu-jitsu. I've never missed work, and I've been a firefighter for about 10 years now. I never missed work from jiu-jitsu that I know of. Maybe a day or maybe half a day. I can't really remember, but I haven't missed work in a significant manner. I don't think I missed a day from it. But anyway, looking at my injuries, though, they happen. My most annoying injury is my rib injury. I have a dislocated rib. Happened, I don't know if it was 12 or 13 years ago. I dislocated my rib when I was trying to do a butterfly guard sweep. And I was trying very hard to do this. Like, I was putting way too much energy and effort into it. I was in a tournament one time, and I was attempting to do a triangle, and my knee popped. I go, that's not cool. Nothing resulted majorly, but my knee was sore for more than a month. And this was when I was working on the fire department, and it was like I kind of garried into the to work every day and limped a little bit more than I was comfortable with, but I got through it. And then more recently than that, You know that, so you're in turtle guard or you're turtled and somebody reaches around like the far side with their arm and you could hook that and kind of roll over and do that. I tried that on somebody who was quite a bit bigger than me and they weren't wanting to roll over with me. Like they were really sagging back and I tried really hard and my same rib dislocated again a little bit and it was like sore for several weeks, maybe even longer. But all those things happened when I was trying to do something with more force than I should. And that's been a mistake. Luckily, I haven't been injured worse than that. But if I'm trying to force something, I try to tell myself to stop and reevaluate the situation to do it a little more smoothly. And can you guys think of anything that you guys tried to force, like a technique-wise, and it resulted in something like your leg popping, Gary, or or something like, man, I think I just pushed too hard on that movement instead of trying to transition to something else or to reframe it.
You know what's happened to me a couple times is I've ran into that same situation as you have with my rib. I have a permanently sticking out rib, and I've injured it a couple times. It's a very painful injury, and I've come to the conclusion, like you said, it's a lot of times if I'm on the bottom and I'm really trying to get up, almost like doing a Turkish get up, going back to kettlebell reference, but really forcing myself up instead of using good technique, really trying to muscle somebody. I start feeling really my core, my ribs, really stressing. And, just after having a couple injuries there, I've now got a little bit smarter where I don't, try to force, as you're saying, Byron. I'll go back to, maybe I need to shrimp out a little bit, as you say, do a jumbo shrimp instead of a popcorn shrimp, get a little bit more space. Maybe I need to, frame a little bit better. I know I've talked to you about that after your seminar. I've really worked hard on framing, where I'm not going to get put in as bad a position where I'm going to have to force stuff. So that is, definitely helped me. I've just recognized it after making some dumb mistakes. But you're talking about somewhere that we've been forcing something. I always ran into the problem of getting hurt. Sometimes is not tapping quick enough. The ego got in the way, especially when I first started. When I used to roll with you all the time, Byron, you started off really good. You had a really, really good armbar from the guard, and you used to give me all the time. And I used to think I could get out, and my arm would pop, and it was just stupidity. And the same thing. It made me not, my gains weren't where they should have been because my arm was always hurting me. Just a dumb, stupid ego got in my way that I didn't want to tap. I thought it was more important to beat you when I first started instead of trying to learn. And, I paid for it.
I've been fortunate in the not muscling myself into injuries or refusing to tap. Those lessons I think were easy for me to learn for some reason. But going back to what Gary was talking about, training through injuries that maybe you shouldn't. About 2 years ago, maybe it's been 3 years ago now, I tore my abdominal wall somehow. And I don't even remember exactly how it happened, but it was to the point where every time I sneezed, it felt like somebody was ripping my guts open with a hacksaw. I couldn't hold a plank position to do a push-up. I mean, not like it was painful, but I literally could not hold the position. I couldn't lay on my back and lift my feet off the mat. I could lay on my back though and drag my feet up to my butt. I could lift my knees, and I never took any time off because of that. I went to class and just rolled through the warm-ups. I couldn't do half the things and tried to train. And that thing lingered on for probably 6 months. And I look back on it and I think, well, what if I would have actually seen a doctor for starters? And what if I just took 3 weeks off, 4 weeks off, because I probably made almost no progress during that period of time because my training was so, everything I did had to be, done differently. And it was just like get on the mat and try and survive. So, definitely a mistake I think I made. And next time I tear my abdominal wall or something like that, I'm definitely going to see a doctor and see if I can rehab it and get it fixed a little sooner.
Yeah, that's interesting. I never heard that injury before like that. So, man, it's been a long time. I think in the first 30 or so episodes, we did an injury episode and had people just kind of tell us what it's like to get injured in certain ways and how they overcame that. So if you are wondering about how do I recover from this surgery, it might be in that episode. But I never heard of the tearing of an abdominal wall. You want to build that bad, wall with bricks, Joe. 6 packs of bricks at a time. Like, get those 6-pack abs. But, that's an interesting one. You never did let yourself really recover from that and take off time, huh?
No, I mean, it just after, I don't know, I couldn't hold a plank position for probably 8 or 10 weeks. And then, gradually got a little better. But it took 6 months before I was back to normal. And I wonder in hindsight if I'd have just taken 3 or 4 weeks off or possibly seen a doctor. You know?
Yeah. I got a email, or I think somebody commented on one of our videos on YouTube about, hey, I injured my rib. What should I do? And I just responded like less than a sentence. Go to see a doctor. Like, if you're asking me for advice, that's the only advice I have to give you over the internet. Like, if it's, you'll know if it's not bad enough to go to a doctor. If you think you should, go see one. And you only get one body, so try not to screw it up doing jiu-jitsu, because you could train safely.
Yeah, and I think probably a good rule of thumb is if there are things that the normal person can do and you no longer can, like if you injure your knee and you cannot squat down 2-3 days later, or in my case, I could not hold a plank position without feeling like my guts were going to fall out, you should probably see a doctor.
Gary can hold the plank position. His guts are stable, but after a little while, he does leak.
I always thought that was normal, Byron.
To a degree, as large as you enter into the geriatrics phase of your planking career.
Planking ain't easy.
So I've written down a few mistakes, and it didn't take me long to kind of think outside of like mistakes of my personal jiu-jitsu experience, and it was looking at getting my wife on the mats and having her do jiu-jitsu. Just the overall impression I had of the process was going to be that it would be like a fairly smooth transition to jiu-jitsu. She'll like it. It's fun. And really, her jiu-jitsu experience is a lot different than mine. I could roll with somebody who is rough and not necessarily have a rough roll. I'm happy to roll with anybody in the room, typically speaking, unless I'm injured, and have a good time. And she doesn't have those skills and ability to do that. And sometimes we would go train, and we get in the car and drive home, and she'd be very frustrated. And I can't think of the last time I left jiu-jitsu super upset with myself. And she experiences that. I don't know how often, but she does experience those frustrations that I just kind of have forgotten that I got those. I mean, I remember, you're frustrated. Gary starts tapping you out a lot. That becomes frustrating. I used to, back when we started, I had a little advantage on Gary, and now the tables have turned. But I don't let that frustrate me now. It doesn't matter. And I tell her, I've tapped to, blue belts and white belts, this year. She's frustrated that she rolls with some guy who's relatively new, and he kind of smashes her for the whole roll. I'm like, that's part of it. But I need to know that person is going to make it frustrating. Like that, the mistake was I thought it would be straight up as much fun as I was having. That's not the case. Like there are parts that are frustrating. There are parts that I think she has been able to kind of bond with some of the other women at the gym is like who to not roll with. I can't tell you that. I can tell you some of the guys to not roll with based on how I rolled them. But some of the guys that roll rough with me roll super nice to her. And it's more personality than it is actual abilities on the mats. So, and those affect me more than like I'm like a lack of focus right now. Yeah, I know that's a problem, but I can find a focus tomorrow and really work on something. But screwing up how my wife does jiu-jitsu and how she feels about it and how we talk about it is something I don't want to get terribly wrong. And it's something that I've tried to make mistakes on. But I know that anytime that we're coming home from jiu-jitsu where she's upset the next day, or she's taking the day off, not because she isn't sore, but because it's not fun today, and those sort of things. But try not to make those mistakes. And
yeah, not all of us are going to get our wives on the mat, but at some point, if you stay in jiu-jitsu long enough, you're going to play the role of a mentor. You're going to kind of help guide the newer guys coming in or girls coming in on the mats. And if I'm hearing what you're saying, Byron, I think a mistake that is often made is to sort of assume that everybody's jiu-jitsu journey is going to be like ours. And that's just not the case. It could be equally wrong to expect my journey to be like other people's. I could get frustrated because things aren't playing out for me the same way they did for Gary or Byron. And we just have to realize that everybody's journey from white belt to black belt or wherever they end up is not going to be the same.
Yeah, and she sees me not having the same struggles as her, and it's frustrating. And if I roll with her and I'm not trying all that hard, and she is, that's also frustrating to her. And then hey, it's a lot of this is skill, and then she goes and she applies skill to somebody who's significantly bigger and stronger than her, but she has a skill advantage and it doesn't work. That's also frustrating because I just told her that was my skill and she had the skill advantage and it didn't work. It's like, overall, I think she enjoys it, but I would like her to go when I'm not going. So if I'm at work someday and she's able to go, she's not really jumping at it to go. I think she just has to go and hang out with me for the time. And have to try to get better at jiu-jitsu. But if she really liked it, she would go regardless of whether I was available to go, and that's that's fine. She does so many different exercises out, different workouts and different things. She's kind of all over with different activities. But how to push somebody to jiu-jitsu without pushing them away has been a little bit tricky, especially when dealing with a spouse, I guess.
Yeah, that's definitely a fine line, like you said, how to get somebody into jiu-jitsu without pushing them away. But I can tell from rolling with Becky that every time I roll with her, she just gets that much better. And what I really like about rolling with Becky is her technique is so good. And I've told numerous people this, and it's like she gets like a free private lesson with you, Byron, every Saturday. Byron will work with her for like 2 hours Saturday. They'll just work we'll go back into kind of like what we were talking about. They'll be focusing on something. And then I'll go roll with Becky after that. And, I'm just so impressed because I don't get to roll with her every week. So I probably only roll with her, every couple months. And when I do, somebody who's only rolling with her, every now and then is going to see the big differences. And I've seen just a huge, leap in skills. And I hope you're listening to this, Becky, you can hear it from somebody else. So you can hear from somebody else how great you're doing.
So she does get a lot of teaching and the stuff from me, but it sometimes it's hard to learn something like that from a spouse, and it's good to come from an outside source. Like she likes learning from Gary. She'll do percent wise, like time on the mat. She's learned a lot more from Gary than me. Like the time she gets monthly or whatever with Gary is more than the time she gets weekly with me. An importance level, and same thing with Craig, and we got a couple guys at Fox Fitness. She likes training with Dane. She goes, I like the way he teaches. It really makes me it clicks with me. She really liked the seminar with Tim Sled. Like he handed out paper and some instructions and some details. She goes, I like that a lot. It helps me learn. Well, I've never done that before. Yeah.
Well, I noticed the one thing, like when I'll start working with her, that's the first thing she'll say is like, hey, it's about time I learned something real. Normally it's right after she's worked with you.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always like it when somebody else is showing her stuff because it's coming from somebody who's not her spouse. And I think that's it. That's like I think the classic example is with like we just had the episode about pistol shooting a week or two ago, and like it would be hard to learn how to shoot pistols shoot a gun from your spouse, because just think how much easier it would be from an instructor at a class. Like that person, clearly, their authority, they're teaching the class, you're going to listen to them and do what they say. But from a spouse, they're your spouse first, and then instructor second. And so I don't know. I just think that it's a hard body of water to cross with a bridge or even a boat, Joe.
Yeah, I think Gary said something about that a week or two ago, so I'll take his word for it.
Another thing about her is when she's got, I think, 2 stripes. See, she has 2 stripes. I'll just say that. And she really likes, like, when she gets a stripe, she's legitimately happy. Like, we go home, she's excited about jiu-jitsu. It's a big deal. I got my first stripe on my black belt. That's the first stripe I've ever received. Gary and I trained for 2 years without even like a hint of recognition of getting better. We got our blue belts. So no stripe white belt, 2 years later, or however long it was, blue belt. No other stripes ever on my blue belt. No stripes. Gary's never had a stripe on his belt that I know of. Have you? Or have you?
No, I haven't.
So it's not a thing. That's not like it to you. It's not a motivating factor. Like, I don't know anybody who cares less about their belt color than Gary, but for her, and I think for a lot of people, getting that stripe really feels good. It really shows, like, okay, yeah, my jiu-jitsu still doesn't work very well against a lot of people, but somebody thinks it's doing better, and they, it's been Jake Fox that's given her stripes. He's recognizing that she's getting better at jiu-jitsu. Here's a stripe, Becky, and that's better than her submitting, some guy or something on the mats. It's like, I am getting better at jiu-jitsu. And for that day or so, it's a good, I could tell it's a rewarding experience. And so, that as a coaching tool and as a motivation tool, I think is a good one that, in the past hasn't been utilized. So you can count that as a mistake, but, it's just something that we just didn't do back in the day. Another thing, so I wrote down some things about, lessons learned on my wife. What happens to her sometimes is she's kind of shy when it comes to partnering up with people. She doesn't go up and say, hey, let's roll. That's what I do. Or people are asking me to roll because I know people a lot better at anywhere we go. So what happens is she'll roll with me and I'll say, hey, next roll with this person, or I'll tell somebody, hey, grab Becky. But when that doesn't happen, she stands there and waits, which, it doesn't sound like a terrible thing. But what happens is the person that nobody wants to roll with ends up standing there next to her. And that's who she gets to train with. And that's a terrible experience. Like the people that like, hey, let's train. Who's you're paired up with them, you're with him, you're with that guy. And then, okay, look, there's Becky. Byron's like, I'll go, we're the last 2. Coincidentally, nobody wanted to roll with that dude, and Becky was too shy, and this happens way too often. And so I try to pair up better, and not just with, most people are good to roll with, but a lot of times that last guy is not an enjoyable roll. And so that's another thing, a lesson I've learned on the mat is to help anybody. Like, it happens to the new guy. The new guy will stand there looking around and trying to figure out who's going to roll with him. If you get paired up with the last guy, that might be the smelly guy. That might be the guy who drops a lot more elbows. That might be the leaky guy. There could be a lot of things going on with that person. But you didn't get the person that everybody wanted to roll with, because that person got paired up pretty much immediately.
The leaky guy.
If your first 5 classes, the only guy you roll with is stinky gi guy that only knows neck cranks, those might be the only 5 classes you ever go to.
Yeah. So that's just been a thing that, and really the fix is to get her more familiar with her teammates, and to not feel like when she's asking somebody to roll, she's taking anything from them. Like, she, what I mean by that? Like, she's not taking a roll away from them. It's their job as a teammate to roll with people. And sometimes they're going to get a roll that's not, she grabs a brown belt. It's not going to be super competitive, but that's okay with that brown belt. And it should be okay with that brown belt to get an occasional roll with a white belt, because they're part of a team.
Yeah, it definitely should be okay. More than an occasional roll. And I still think, even if your heads or tails better than somebody, you can still make that roll very beneficial. Work on, like we talk about in games for BJJ, work on your half guard from your bad side, work on passing to your weak side, do everything to your weak side, put yourself in some crazy positions, stick your neck out and, work out of some guillotines. I just think that, no matter how good you are, you can make just about every roll really, really solid for yourself.
Yeah.
I would say every roll. I'd say if you have a roll where you got nothing out of it, that's on you.
Yes, definitely. Unless you're rolling with a stinky guy. That one.
Well, you still get something out of it because you're trying to avoid the stinkiest areas, and it helps you learn to control and helps you become aware of the situation. And
And so also socially, looking at mistakes I've made, I think that this has made. I remember making this repeatedly, and it's honestly saying it's kind of embarrassing, but because to think of me doing it now is just crazy. But and I hope that people. I think it's a common mistake, but I hope people stop making it as time goes on and they build confidence. But when I would have somebody show up in class that I knew from off the mats, whether it be a friend or a coworker or whatever, I would go really hard with that person, and I would tap them out like as many times as I could in a short amount of time, and really like, welcome to jiu-jitsu. This is what it is, and this is how good I am at it. And that is basically a recipe for getting the people who really want to do jiu-jitsu to stick it around. But if you're at all questionable, you leave. You try it once, and that sucked, and you're gone. And so, like, my success rate of getting people to train long term was super low, because I would basically bring people in, beat them up, and say, "Did you have a good time? Did you want to do this more?" And they would typically say, "Oh yeah," and then they just never show up. And that's a mistake. Hard to see that any other way than a mistake, because it really was. It was working my own ego. It was trying to impress somebody, and that doesn't. The long term result would have been, let's get them to jiu-jitsu, get them in shape, get them some enjoyment off the mat, and I pushed people away from that, doing that, training too hard with new people.
Yeah, that's always a big one. Kind of like what Joe was saying. If you roll with a stinky guy 5 classes in a row, you're never going to come back. Same thing if you just trash your friend, that person's probably not going to come back unless they're the really gung-ho part. And I always laugh about one guy I'd been talking to for a long time about jiu-jitsu. I'd been, he was a really big weightlifter, bodybuilder, and I'd always talk to him about jiu-jitsu and CrossFit and stuff like that. And we'd been talking for probably 6 months, and, he wanted to try it. The problem was he was working on Saturdays, and that was his only free time. And he always told me he wanted to do it. I don't think he even really knew what jiu-jitsu was. But so finally he got his schedule changed, had a Saturday off, and I made an appointment, and we were going to meet and train. And he gets up there, and he never told me anything. He went through the first class. He did look a little shocked, and really had a good time, and he's still doing it here 6-7 years later, and it's really good. But he told me after like a couple months, after all those talks we had, I guess he thought we were doing CrossFit, not jiu-jitsu. And so he showed up thinking we were going to be flipping tires and getting sledgehammers out, hitting tires, and doing stuff like that. And next thing he knows, he's learning how to twist people's arms and choke people unconscious. But I always laugh at that. I was figuring I must not be doing a very good job of explaining it back then. But the cool thing is he's my number one training partner, and he's been training for a long time now.
Yep, you made an awkward conversion from somebody who thought they were going to do CrossFit and ended up having a good time with you on the mats. I think we could go on and on about lessons learned and mistakes we've made on the mats. We could even revisit this topic maybe in a year or so if I keep track of all the things I mess up between here and then.
We could probably do 256 episodes now.
But I think it's a good exercise to look at, kind of evaluate yourself. What am I doing wrong? What have I done wrong? And then keep working forward. You can't go back and change those things, but avoiding them, learning from others' mistakes. Hopefully you've done that today.
Speaking of avoiding mistakes and learning from other people's mistakes, that brings us to the article of the week. We have an article this week. It's titled "A Nice Lady's Adventures in the Gentle Art of Jiu-Jitsu." And she writes an article here. It's competing in midlife, how to train to win after age 35. And she lists a whole series of things that she pays attention to keep her on the mats and keep her successful. And not doing these things, I think, would definitely be mistakes. The first one that she lists is, I need to actually warm up. And Gary and I are both into our 50s. Byron's not quite there yet, but I think we can relate to this. And when I first read the title of that section, I thought, well, I don't really do that. But then as I read the section, I thought, well, I guess I do, because she talked about taking a few rounds and just rolling light. And that's kind of the way that I warm up. And it is important. We talked about injury avoidance and taking care of our bodies and going into the gym. And when it comes time for free rolling, pick a training partner that you trust, somebody that'll go your speed, and get a good warm up around him before you hit it hard.
I was going to say that's actually helped me a lot. The warm-up is very important. Her point number 2, selective about training partners. And this is one thing I did not do when I first started. And like she said, is she got a little bit older and I ran into the same situation. Really have to be selective about your training partners. And what do we mean by that is, you know, I love rolling with black belts. I love rolling with white belts. I love rolling with anybody in between. But there's always some people who use a little bit more force, a little bit more crazy on the mat. You know, they may spaz out if they lose a position, may crank my neck and turn it around and make me look like the exorcist. Those people, you know, I am going to minimize my rolls with. You know, I don't want to get hurt. Kind of like we were talking about before, every time I'm on the sidelines, I'm not getting better. So I definitely want to get better. I'm going to, you know, be selective who I roll with. And it's definitely helped save me and keep me on the mat.
Yeah, another tip she has is to treat the micro injuries. So when you start to get hurt a little bit, address that, change things a little bit. Take a day or so off and let your body heal before it actually gets injured at a full scale. I think that just is something that we encounter more and more as we get a little bit more gray on the mats.
Get a little more gray or lose our hair before it turns gray, one or the other. I like the last one, and I don't mean to get to the end of it. We can back up and hit some of the other ones too, but I really like the last one. Tap when a grip breaks. Man, my shoulders are shot. If my arm gets straightened out in an arm bar, the hitchhiker escape's not really an option for me, the way that it rotates the shoulder, and I don't have any rotator cuff left. And so, you know, I do the rear naked choke type of grip to defend, and I try and stack my opponent. But if that fails and I'm still on my back and they straighten my arm out, I just tap. And I've had guys tell me, man, I wasn't even really straightening your arm. And it's like, yeah, but once you got the arm bar, I'm just going to tap. And that has saved me from a lot of days off.
Joe, it's funny that you said, you know, you really like that one before you came on the show with us, and Byron and I were talking, and I told Byron, you know, I was like, man, I really like this article. And I told him that my favorite was tap when a grip breaks. I thought that's very important. You know, I do that. And I also do that offensively. A lot of times with my training partners, if I have them in an arm bar, and you're always going to know who you're rolling with. Some guys don't tap. Some people will. Like, you know, Joe, you're saying you'll tap, you know, when the grip breaks. I'm the same way. But I've got some training partners that don't tap. And I will, once the grip gets broke, I know I'm going to finish it. I just, you know, flow onto something else. And I don't really need that submission. It doesn't make a difference. But I have actually had a couple of people get mad at me that I let them out of it. You know, they're like, hey, I wanted to get out of it. And I was like, okay, you know, I'll go how you want, but I'm still not going to, you know, once I got that grip broken, I'm not going to crank it or anything.
Yep. It's a good article. I appreciate looking at that. You know, you can still compete at any age, but you might have to try to train a little smarter and protect yourself a little differently. It's on. There'll be a link to it in the show notes, but it's on grapplinggirl.blogspot.com. A nice lady's adventures in the gentle art of jiu-jitsu. And yeah, that's. I think we'll revisit this blog in the future. It's a lot of fun and learn something from it.
Yeah, definitely don't make the mistake of not checking that blog out, because that's a lesson you need to learn.
Way to bring it all together, Gary.
I'm good at something, at least, Joe.
Yep. And if you want to support us in our attempts to do good at something, Patreon has been a great way to do that. And if you want to join the list of people like Adam, Ryan, and Brian. Thanks, guys, for being Patreon supporters. What you could do is donate like $1 per episode is the most common amount that people donate. And we'll send you out a 5-inch BjjBrick gi patch and a sticker as some tokens of appreciation. And you get a shout out periodically on the podcast. But really, you're supporting something that you believe in, that you want to grow and get better, and that's the podcast. And if that's something that you have value in, it's important to support it. And we've made a lot of growth in the past year or so, and we hope to do the same next year and become even bigger and better.
Yep. Check us out on social media. We're on Facebook. We try and stay pretty active there. We've got an app, and that's the easiest way to get the podcast every week. So go to your iStore or whatever they call it. If you've got an iPhone, I've never owned one. If you've got an Android, go to the Google Play Store, download our app. You'll get the latest episode every week. And we've got a YouTube channel as well, and we've got some reviews on there. And Byron archives the shows on there as well, so you could actually listen to the show via YouTube if you chose to.
Joe, what if you have a rotary phone?
Dial 478659.
Okay. Or isn't that Jesse's girl phone number?
8675309.
That's right. Or call Gary, which is a different number, and have him hit play on his speaker, and he'll put the phone down, and he'll get you through the shows that way.
And if you'd like a transcript of the show, start back at the beginning and write everything down,
and then send it to us.
Send it to us so we can send it out to people. That's we'd appreciate that. What we'd really appreciate, though, tell all your friends about us. Definitely, if you're listening to this show, you like jiu-jitsu, most of your friends probably train jiu-jitsu. Let them know about us. And if you happen to come through the Midwest, Byron and I are in Wichita, Kansas. Joe's in Houston, Texas, and near New Orleans, south of there. Hit us up, bjjbrick@gmail.com. We'd love to train with you if you get in any of those areas.
Roger that.
Yeah, we really enjoy getting some mat time with the listeners, and when it happens, it's Gary describes it as magical. No, it's a highlight of the week when a listener sends an email, "Hey, I'm going to be in town. Can we train?" And then we make it work. That's good. Sometimes if it's just one day, or Gary and I are both busy, it's unfortunate. But there's always a place to train here in Wichita, and if we're not there, we'll still send you to a gym here and get you some mat time, even if we're not able to make it. But good time as always. Stay sweaty, my friends,
and don't forget to shower.
Train hard, train smart, get better. We'll see you on the mats, guys.
Thank you for listening. I hope you find the time today to roll. After all, the best way to get better at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is to do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.